Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Go 24/7 podcast. Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. As man, it's getting chilly. We're approaching actual cold weather temperatures. And Glen, I might have to wear a jacket this weekend. I was a little chilly in that press box on Saturday, but hey, man, it's football weather, and we get another Saturday night in Death Valley. Man, how excited are you just to be able to be at home, sleep in your own bed, and cover a football game?
Yeah, I've been enjoying this weather. Been outside a lot more recently. Been putting on the jackets and going on walks and runs and stuff. So, yeah, it's been really good. And I think LSU's probably thinking that they're glad to be home too. I mean, look, they were on the road for a while with those two road games, and just
Hmm.
to be back in the comfort of their own area, bed, home, just it's all good, I guess, for from that perspective. And you've got a lot of the remaining schedule at home too, so that's always good.
Well, we appreciate you tuning in, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you give us a like and review there as well. Glenn, Army coming up this week. This is one of those matchups where you have to play discipline, you have to play smart, tough football, and you can't overlook an Army team that is undergoing a transition. They're not the typical or typical. I almost messed the words up there. Typical triple option attack. This is going to look a little bit different. They've thrown more passes through 6 games, or almost as much as they did the entire season last year. But there's still going to be a lot of eye candy, still a lot of discipline. So let's start with the defense here, Glenn. I mean, this is a challenge to maintain that physicality and also maintain emotionally the standard coming off of a great game against Auburn. You can't have a letdown performance here against a team that will love to control the clock and would love to leave Baton Rouge with an upset victory.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to carry this through, and I think a big part of the message this week, and rightfully so, has been not only just about the on the field game, but just the significance of this matchup off the field as
Mhm.
well. Bringing in a team like Army, haven't played that program and since 1931. Just doing the research there, I mean, like they've only played one time before, and Army won that game pretty handily back in the 1930s during the early Great Depression. So this isn't a series that has a lot of history or anything like that, but certainly when you welcome in a military team like this, that um, there's some
Mhm.
extra stuff kind of involved with this game, and certainly with what those young men are going to be doing for the country and all that after the game, after their careers in college are over. So it's been a from the players, from Brian Kelly, it's been a lot about respect and paying respect to those guys when they come down here. And so, I do think that's going to be kind of woven into the fabric of this game as well. So, it'll be interesting to see what they do. They say they have a couple plans in place to kind of make it a fun experience for those guys and certainly pay respect to them as well. So, interested to see what those are. But yeah, then on the field, I mean, you hope that LSU can continue to carry this over. I mean, look, this is a non-conference battle that at least matchup wise, LSU should be able to handily win. I mean,
Mhm.
that's no disrespect to Army. I mean, obviously these are guys that are going to go fighting for our country after they're done, and that's 100 times more significant than anything that happens on the football field on Saturday. So, but just from a pure matchup standpoint, LSU has a lot of advantage in this game. Defensively, I think probably the biggest thing I'm going to be looking for is just focus and discipline on in the run, making sure that those guys are gap sound, that they're fitting, and that they're clogging up those running lanes. This is a triple option offense that Army runs, which is a little bit unique. I mean, LSU hasn't seen anything like this year so far, and every time you have to put uh, game plan for that triple option, it's more of a hassle than anything, just because it is so different from everything else that you face throughout the course of a year. But even Brian Kelly said that they'll mix in some more passing. They've been doing a little bit more passing than they have in years past, and so LSU's going to have to be on their toes for that as well. But I just think that the big thing here is just going to be slowing down that triple option, making sure that you're gap sound, getting those guys off the field on third down, not letting them break free for any big runs or anything like that. So, and then offensively, look, I mean, they're probably going to go down and score. I mean, the way that this offense, LSU offense, is operating right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they score 4 or 5 touchdowns in a row, and then maybe turn it over to a guy like Garrett Nussmeier or something. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of that's the ideal scenario that I think you go into this game having, and we'll see how close LSU can execute to that game plan. But I do think that this is going to be a game that, at least on the field, LSU should have no problems winning pretty handily.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, LSU has the better talent, has obviously the better scheme. You talked offensively. I mean, look, Army comes in here, and Jeff Monken, the head coach, longtime head coach, has had good success at Army. He mentioned, he said, look, their offense, I don't know how you're going to stop this. He goes, you have a quarterback putting up historical numbers. You've got receivers that are stepping up each and every single week. He mentioned Kyron Lacey as a guy that, just had his breakout performance against Auburn. So it just is another piece to the puzzle for this Auburn offense or this LSU offense. Going
Yeah,
back
I
to
mean,
that
look,
Auburn game. Go ahead.
yeah. I mean, look, I mean, I think that offensively you're in a groove right now. I mean, you just
Mhm.
mentioned what the head coach just said. I feel like we've heard that from every head coach for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, Lane Kiffin said it, and Freeze said it last week. I mean, like there's really nothing that anybody's been able to do to show that they can
Yeah.
slow this thing down. And we've had several pieces that even after the Auburn game come out about just the historic nature that this offense is on. There's been some talk about 2019. I mean, I've heard the 2019 buzz all week. I mean, after that game against Auburn on Saturday, and look, I think that there's still a lot that this team has to prove, this offense has to prove in order to get there. I mean, that was a historic, not only in terms of numbers, but in terms of the season and the teams that they played and the undefeated run that they had. Don't know that this offense can catch that group, but they're putting up, at
Mhm.
least numbers wise, some stuff to be rivaled with, and certainly the improvement from Jayden Daniels. You've gotten the run game going with Logan Diggs. I think there's going to be a very good case that LSU at the end of the year is not only going to have a 4,000-yard passer, they're going to have 2 1,000-yard receivers, 1,000-yard rusher, and then maybe possibly 2 1,000-yard rusher with if Daniels can get there. I mean, that's insane stuff. I mean, like that.
Yeah.
You don't see that ever. I mean, like I would have to go back and do a ton of research, but I'm not sure if that's ever been done in college football history. I mean, that's just really, really tough to do. Um, it's all a testament to this group and certainly the coaching staff that has found ways to get these guys involved. And it's on these players too. I mean, look, Brian Thomas has been an extremely improved player since even the fall when we saw him, when he was
Yeah.
not exactly flashing every day like he has at every game this year. I mean, he had some struggles, I think, in fall camp, as did some other guys, but they turned it around very quickly. Jayden Daniels is operating at a level that, I mean, we've only seen Joe Burrow operate at in an LSU uniform at the quarterback position. And I've also seen some stuff about he hasn't, they haven't faced a ton of elite defenses over the last couple weeks. Well, you know what? You still got to go out there and prove it with that efficiency. I mean,
Yeah.
even quarterbacks that don't face that kind of level of competition every week, they don't put up those numbers, not the average quarterbacks, not the good
Yeah.
quarterbacks. The great ones do. And I think that Jayden has proven that he can be a great quarterback. And certainly that test in a couple weeks in Tuscaloosa is going to tell us a lot about this team and a lot about this offense. But the way that they're rolling right now, um, I think all of those goals are within reach. All of those stats are within reach. And we'll just see how it has to play out. But, they're in a really, really good spot offensively.
Yeah, they're in a great spot offensively. And I think too, Glenn, when you look at the unpredictability of what this offense can do, it's not just one guy. I mean, I was looking at the game, and Malik Neighbors talked a little bit about this, and we'll have a piece later out this afternoon about all the different weapons. The diversity of this offense has been something we've talked a lot about. but they'll run that little pop pass, where it's kind of essentially like a jet sweep and Daniels just
Yeah.
tosses it to the guy in front of him. It's been Neighbors. They ran it with Aaron Anderson. They've run it with Brian Thomas. You can't key in on one guy. Like a defense can't just say, okay, we know Anderson's on the field. This is what they're running. Want to go back to you because I know you liked to watch this a lot last year. It feels like Denbrock feels more comfortable.
Oh
Neighbors even
yeah.
talked about that. I mean, talk about just last year to this year and what we're seeing in the creativity of this offense.
Oh, it's no comparison. I mean, they're light years ahead of where they were last year. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of the returning continuity you have, not only at quarterback and at receiver, certainly on the offensive line as well. But I like that you brought up that play because we talk with neighbors about this, and I'm sure you're going to get into it with your piece here.
Mhm.
That's just another way that they are kind of getting these guys in rhythm early in games. It's not
Yeah.
they don't always have to take the deep shots. They'll take the deep shots when they're there. But especially for a guy like Neighbors, who they move across the field a lot and who they know teams are going to try to double team at times, that's just a really quick and easy route for them to just get the ball in his hands and let him go make a play. And that's
Mhm.
something that Neighbors has been able to do extremely, extremely well this year. Even after the catch, he's been insanely good. And I think that's just an offense and a coordinator like Den Brock and certainly the coaches that he has around him on the offensive side of the ball. That's just knowing what you have, and they know
Yeah.
exactly what they have in a guy like Neighbors, and certainly with what Brian Thomas has been able to do in that respect as well, going vertical and making those big contested catches. Um, and look, and I think the bigger thing here, and we asked Malik about this yesterday as well, is when defenses are going to start keying in on Neighbors and Thomas and double teaming or trying to get an extra guy just kind of in that area of where they are at, that's when Jayden's really been able to utilize his legs.
Yeah.
The field really opens up for him when they have, all those guys dropping back in coverage trying to defend those receivers. And it's just really opened up another element to this offense. I mean, we always knew that Jayden could run. But the biggest thing here, I think, is that it's not the quarterback design runs that are working so well. It's when things are not there for him in the deep part of the field because he's been
Mhm.
taking those shots, that he's able to still scamper out and get 15, 20 yards and make guys miss and break tackles and score touchdowns. Um, and that's really, really exciting. I mean, that
Yeah.
is, I'm trying to remember. I think the first touchdown of the fourth quarter against Missouri, that was a deep shot play that they were trying to get to one of the receivers, and Jayden just kind of wove in and out of the defense and scored from like 35 yards out, broke I don't know how many tackles made, I don't know how many guys missed, but that was not a quarterback design run, I don't think. And that's just another way that he and this offense have been able to execute because Missouri respected the fact that they were looking to go deep with the ball, and they took that away from him. And he's like, "All right, well, I'll just beat you with my legs instead." So there's really no element of this offense right now that isn't working. And that's really, really impressive to see. And that's why they're having so much success and scoring at such an efficient rate.
Wanted to add on to that too. Jesse Palmer talked about he was the color analyst for the Auburn game. Um, he talked about when it's man coverage and Daniel sees they've got the deep routes going, he really doesn't read it. He just takes off. When he sees around 5, 10, 15 yards, like whether that's a kind of a green light from Denbrock of saying, hey, go. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just so dangerous. Wanted to get your thoughts on this before we kind of take a little look at the defense. I want to talk about, the front seven. This offensive line lost Emory Jones. Zalance Hurd's going to probably get the start this weekend if Jones can't go. Your thoughts on Zalance Hurd and this opportunity that he has now to really gain some momentum? Because I look at it this way, Glenn. If you're getting your first real start here against Army, you get the bye week to continue to work on some things. If Jones isn't ready to go in a couple weeks against Alabama, this week's really pivotal for Zalance Hurd to get those reps in and, for lack of better words, get some of those mistakes out of the way.
Yeah, yeah. Look, when a couple weeks ago when he was kind of rotating in and out with Miles Frazier, when they were doing that little rotation there, where Hurd would come in at right tackle and Frazier would
Mhm.
go out and Jones would slide into guard. I think a lot of people thought that might be the best version of this offensive line if they were able to make it work. it wasn't really working all that great. I mean, there were times where Jones was getting blown up on the inside, and I think it was just a little bit more of a transition for both of those guys to kind of handle that. So they went back to what's been working, and they've been really good the last several weeks with Frazier at right guard and Jones with right tackle. But it's also limited the opportunities that Zalance Hurd has had. And so now, with Jones out, this is a really good opportunity for this true freshman to really take you know take hold of his future. I mean, and the
Yeah.
future is going to be him at right tackle, and then eventually at left tackle once Will Campbell leaves. So, I think that this is going to be a really great game for him. It's going to be his first start in his college career. He's played a lot already, but he's been more of a rotational guy to this point. How he handles 65, 70 snaps, if that's kind of what winds up happening. Be very interested to see what happens there. And to your point about Emory Jones, it sounds like that they're not too concerned about him
Hmm.
missing that Bama game in a couple weeks. I do feel like it's important we throw that out. But in
Yeah.
that case, if he is not ready, if he's not quite as ready, you absolutely need this game for Hurd to kind of get his feet wet for a full game and see just kind of be out there and feel those elements for a full game. I think that is really important for a guy like him. And he handled himself really well, I thought, against Auburn and did a really nice job. Offense didn't really seem to skip a beat much when he was out there, to be honest with you. They scored 4 touchdowns on 4 drives in the second half when he was in there. They were moving the ball pretty proficiently. I mean, he had one holding call and one false start, I believe, but it was also a kind of an uncharacteristic game where I think the offensive line had 3 false start penalties throughout the course of the
Yeah.
game. So they're certainly not all on him. So but yeah, I think it's going to be really, really important for him and for LSU to kind of see what they have when he's out there for a full game.
Agreed. Agreed. I agree with that. I think that look, you have a guy that um, is going to grow into this role no matter what, and I think that's what's important, that we continue to see him grow. We continue to see him learn, because he's going to be a big piece of this offense. He's going to be a big piece of the future of LSU. And man, from as much people say Army's a weird game to schedule in the middle of the year, here's a perfect opportunity for a guy to get some meaningful reps and kind of learn against an opponent that, like you said, no slight to Army, but this is not going to be in Alabama. It's not going to be an A&M with an elite defensive line. Let's get to one more topic here that I think is really interesting. We talked with Paris Shan yesterday, and I decided not to quote myself in the question, Glenn. I actually answered Paris's question before he did, but
Yeah.
you talked a little bit about Mekhi Wingo, and if he can't go, and I think he was listed as doubtful. Obviously, we'll learn more tomorrow, Thursday. If he's listed as doubtful in this game, the emergence of a guy like Paris Shan, Jacoby and Guillory, Jordan Jefferson as this season is gone, does it help? I mean, we know the opponent, but for you, does it help feel a little bit more comfortable about this defensive line losing, which has arguably been, in my opinion, probably the best player from week 1 to week 7?
Yeah, and to be just to kind of put this all out there, I think the reason that Mekhi Wingo is not going to be playing in this game is because they want him to be completely healthy, or at least as close to healthy as possible for Bama. I mean, this is
Yep.
just a natural thing that happens when you have some guys that are maybe a little bit more banged up than others. And it's important to note that Wingo played the entire game against Auburn. It's not like he went out with an injury or anything like that, too. So I do think that they expect both those guys, Jones and Wingo, to be back for Bama. I think this just gives them extra time to rest and heal and rehab whatever they got going on right now. But to your point, this is a really big opportunity for guys like Shand and Jefferson and Guillory, guys who have been rotational pieces, but been very instrumental rotational pieces, I think, to some of the resurgences that we've seen from this D line over the last couple weeks. I mean, Shand was a guy that had a career or a season high 6 tackles, 1.5
Hmm.
tackles for a loss. He had a pass deflection, I think, in there as well. Really looked smooth coming off at defensive end. Did a really nice job of getting some pressure there on Auburn in the second half, in particular. Really like what he showed, and I think there's some versatility there. I don't know that he'll play a ton inside, but especially when you've got Mason Smith and Jacoby and Guillory and Jordan Jefferson, but they also liked playing Mason Smith for the last couple weeks on that DN spot as well. And so if there's a situation that arises where one of those guys goes out for whatever reason, you can slide. I think you can slide Shand in, and he can certainly hold his own against
Yeah.
an Auburn team or against an Army team in that interior spot if they ask him to. And that was the question that I had for him: is do you think there's some versatility there in your game? And he says, I'll play wherever they want me to play. And so, it's good to have that kind of confidence and have that kind of versatility with your game. And I think LSU understands that as well. So we'll be interested to see just kind of how this front seven holds up. I mean, that's going to be, I think that the biggest key to the game is just how those guys communicate on the front line and are able to wrap up and finish plays and make tackles in the second level as well with Perkins and Spates and Greg Penn and Whit Weeks when he gets his opportunity. But it sounds like they, just in hearing what Brian Kelly was saying on Wednesday, they're really going to lean into Omar. They really like what he can do from run game perspective and fitting and being able to fill those gaps as an inside linebacker. So wouldn't expect that you see a ton of weeks early, just like last week. I think that they feel really comfortable with the experience that Omar Spates gives them when healthy. And I think that's going to be another element that they kind of lean into, I think, this weekend against Army.
It's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Army LSU in Death Valley. Glenn, we'll get to predictions later on the week, but I know you mentioned earlier, any final thoughts from this game, something you're excited to watch or, just in general? I will say I'm excited to watch the atmosphere. I think this is going to be
Yeah.
one of the really cool, unique non-conference atmospheres that you see at LSU.
Yeah, and like I don't think you're gonna have a situation here where there's gonna be fans booing Army coming out on the field pregame or anything like that. At least I would hope not. I would really hope that's not the case, but you never know with LSU fans and with these rowdy SEC fans. So you never know. But look, I'm excited about the atmosphere. I'm excited to see what kind of extra uh, flair or festivities they had planned for this game and giving those guys their due respect and appreciation that's all very much deserved. So yeah, that'll be very fun, and then I'll be interested to see. I mean, look, you go into this game thinking that LSU is going to be able to pull away pretty early. I'll be interested to see if they get some of the younger guys involved. If we see a Shelton Sampson who we haven't seen in several
Yeah.
weeks, or Kyle Parker, or some of these younger receivers who are not even really close to the 4-game threshold right now of keeping their red shirt, Jaylen Brown or somebody like that. Like, I would really like to see some of those guys get some opportunities. And, I think if LSU's in a position where they're up 4 or 5 touchdowns, they're not going to just bring Nussmeier out and let him fling it around and run up the score. So that might leave opportunities open for the running backs that haven't been able to play as much recently as well. So Noah Cain and Armani Goodwin, maybe, who we haven't seen much of this year, or Kevontre Bradford, who just seemingly disappeared after the second game of the season. So yeah, I mean, I think Caleb Jackson, the freshman, who has had a couple of carries here and there, and certainly is proven to be an explosive player when he gets those chances, maybe he gets a few more opportunities in a game like this. So I am interested to see just kind of how they balance all that, if they're able to jump out pretty quickly, but more so the atmosphere, and certainly paying respect to those Army guys who are going to be fighting for something much bigger than a football game once they're done with their careers.
It's going to be a great atmosphere. Like you mentioned, I can't wait to see kind of this is one of those opportunities to see some really good the pageantry of college football and obviously what our nation has going on as well. Bryce Koon, Glen West, appreciate you so much for tuning in to this preview pod. We're going to have a great podcast tomorrow, myself and Sonny Ship, and all the recruiting news. If you don't know what's going on, it's a great opportunity for you to get involved over at
You
Go
guys could probably talk for
24/7.
2 hours tomorrow about recruiting stuff.
It's going to be the longest podcast I think Sonny and I've ever done. But Sonny can talk, and I like to talk, so we'll have a good time. But make sure, if you want to be a part of that, and you don't know where this is, and this is your first time listening or watching, if you're on YouTube, make sure to hit subscribe, set up notifications. You know when the new content comes out. And the same thing: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you might get it. We appreciate you being a part of the Go 24/7 family, and we will catch you next time here on the Go 24/7.